Coming up today on the ROL Show.
And one of those conversations, I remember saying to my wife, I wanted to retire with a coffee shop and a bakery because I would love to wake up every morning. I had this, fantasy about having a house upstairs, bakery and coffee shop downstairs.
Yes.
Waking up to the smell of coffee and baked bread every morning. But so I remember mentioning that to her, and her response was, "Well, when I retire, I just want to retire. I don't want another work." Right?
Hey, it's Kalani Wale. I'm super excited today. I have the CEO of Coffee Vida, and he has 10 locations in the California area. His name is Steve Chang. Married, he's got kids, he's married, and today we're going to really interview him and see how we can actually help you find your calling, your purpose, passion, calling, your assignment for life. So welcome Steve. Everyone, welcome Steve here, guys.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Good. And once again, Steve, thank you for your time. Hey, real quick. So let's get started for the viewer. And so you have all these locations for coffee and this brand. First of all, how did this come about? Like, when did this idea come to you? Like you were going to be this coffee entrepreneur?
Sure. I didn't really think that I was going to be this size, to be honest, or to grow as fast as we did. But God has a way of like planting seeds in your life that kind of leads you to it, and sometimes you don't even recognize it. But my first inkling of wanting a coffee and being in coffee was back in college. I walked into a coffee shop on campus, and I was doing my usual thing where I, grab the coffee and add sugar and milk and kind of drown my coffee, so to speak. And right before I was about to do that, the barista looked at me and said, "Hey, that's a really good coffee. Before you put sugar and milk in it, you might want to try it out." And he asked politely. So, I thought, sure, why not? And I tried it. And I got hit with blueberry notes, chocolates, floral notes. And it didn't taste like coffee. I was just blown away by it. And I still remember the name of the coffee. It was called the Peaks of Kilimanjaro. It was a Kenyan coffee. And it was just amazingly delicious. And it really started to pique my interest about drinking coffee for the flavor of coffee and not the additives. And that led into a little bit of a spiral. So few years later, after I met my wife, and we were, when you get married and you're just starting out in your relationship, you kind of sometimes sit and plan your future, how many kids you want, where do you want to live, and, what's God, stored for us. And one of those conversations, I remember saying to my wife, I wanted to retire with a coffee shop and a bakery because I would love to wake up every morning. I had this, fantasy about having a house upstairs, bakery and coffee shop downstairs.
Yes.
Waking up to the smell of coffee and baked bread every morning. But so I remember mentioning that to her, and her response was, "Well, when I retire, I just want to retire. I don't want another work." Right? But so that kind of was in my heart always. But it was. After we sold our family business, so I was involved in helping out with my wife's family noodle business. And when we exited, both Elena and I, my wife, had been working in the noodle business for about 12 years by that point. And so when we exited and sold the business, we had an opportunity to kind of sit, plan, pray, think about what we wanted to do next. And there was a series of conversations we had with missionaries that we were supporting and other people who were sort of spiritual mentors, leaders, and people who walk alongside us that we ended up talking about what next to do. And this idea formed about actually starting a business that could actually become a tool for missionaries in the future. Yeah, Coffee Vida is not a BAM or a business as a mission. It's not a Christian organization by any means. It's just a great coffee shop and hopefully a great coffee company for those who experience it. But our goal ultimately was to create a business and a model that we can hand off to missionaries who want to do missions overseas. And I think giving them a business as a tool to be able to create sustainable income, but have long-term visas and be able to stay in country made a lot of sense. And so This idea was born out of a kitchen in Costa Rica with a friend of ours whose name is Jose de Dios, and was at that time director of Americas for Wycliffe Bible Translation Organization. And so that was sort of the birthing of the idea of Copa Vida. Partially why it's called Copa Vida is because in Costa Rica, the answer to everything is pura vida. And so we did a little play on words on that, but also because Christ is cup of life, and that's what it means to us personally. As a company, Copa Vida is because, when I ask a friend, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee, I'm not saying, hey, man, let's get caffeinated. What I'm saying is, hey, let's go somewhere, sit down, talk about
Yeah,
life, share life together, and find connection, right? So
yeah,
that's why it's called Copa Vida.
beautiful.
Yeah, so it's a very long story. There's a lot of background behind that as well about why we thought this works really well. But our personal reason, my wife and my personal reason for starting the company was so that it can be something we can equip missionaries with. Overall, as a purpose of the company, it's to make great coffee and provide great service to our customers. That's the main reason for doing it. And hopefully we can make some profit and create some resources as a result of it as well. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Steve, take us back to the first location. As a listener who's watching this,
Mhm.
like that entrepreneur, that Christian or kingdom or whoever, if you're not even Christian, like they want to start a business. So you have this idea of Copa Vida, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, how do we execute it? So what are
Yeah.
the things that you can maybe share with the listener, like to help them go from their idea to actually physically executing in life? So what are some of the things that you did to execute and make this dream a reality?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things, but I'll narrow it down to three things that I think are really, really important.
Beautiful.
One is, I think you have to have a sense of uh, not fearlessness, but a little bit of a craziness to to start something. And I mean that genuinely, not tongue in cheek or you have to be a little bit stupid to go, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna risk everything and jump into this. You have to be a little bit based on faith, more than a little bit. For me, faith isn't jumping over a cliff with everybody else. It's actually leaning over, seeing that it's certain instruction and still taking a step forward because you feel a calling, right? So
Yeah.
there, if you're feeling fear before you start, you're actually in a good place. You should feel some of that, right? Like, but do you
Okay.
have either courage, faith, or assurance somewhere to step past that, right? Because I
Beautiful.
think if you don't have that, you don't get the commitment you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one thing is like
The
what
fearless.
helped me get you got to have faith in stepping forward. And I think if you read the Bible, every single character that the story is based on, there was a moment of faith where they had to step forward in faith without having any assurance of success, right? Like,
Beautiful.
yeah, yeah.
Overcoming
So
that
then,
fear. So
yeah.
what's the second step that you said you had three steps? What's the second thing you went on?
Yeah. So the second thing is, no matter what new thing you're doing, don't forget what you've done before, because I really believe God prepares you, right? So the Bible teaches us you're never tested beyond what you can bear, but He also prepares. You hear the story again and again, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
Joseph, Moses, even Christ, there's preparation period before the launch period. So a lot of times I feel like people moving into something new feel like everything has to start over again rather than building on what they've had. So I was able to pull from my experience doing noodle manufacturing, pull from my experiences as a mediator, pull from my experience as a child of immigrant family that had small businesses all their, life.
Mm.
Like I pulled from all of those things to start the next thing. And so it's not like close that chapter and I move on. It's actually that whole thing comes with you. And you have
Yeah.
to pick the pieces where God has said, these are things that I'm preparing you for with, right? So I hate that a lot of times people kind of just feel like it's a 90-degree turn, but rather it should be like a adjustment to a continuation of the story that you are kind of
It's
on.
true.
Yeah.
Because we a lot sometimes we judge ourselves so much, like, hey, I just wasted so much time.
Yeah.
But honestly, God doesn't waste anything.
No,
Everything
no.
you've done will actually
Yeah.
help you in
Yeah.
the next level that God wants you to take. So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, number three.
But before we move on to number three, one of the things I heard a lot from a mentor, a business mentor of mine early on is this phrase: experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. I got a lot of experience. You know what I mean? So
I love that.
yeah, and I didn't realize it was experience till actually this thing started. And so I think that's really important. The
Yeah.
third thing I would say is kind of important in getting this started is don't do it by yourself. And I don't mean you need to go get partners. I don't mean you need to have backers. What I'm talking about is you need accountability.
Mm,
And whether that's in, for my case, it was always my partner, wife, who helped me, keep, perspective on the right things. But I also had business mentors along the way, and people who I trusted to kind of look at what I'm doing and then go, yeah, maybe not, and give me some guidance, and people whose opinions you're going to listen to, even when you don't like what you're hearing. Right. So a lot of times we surround ourselves with people who say, yes, yes, you're great, you're great, you're great, and it allows it to feed our ego and we'll move forward. But I find that having people around me who are going, actually, that's dumb. Don't do that.
so
Is
good.
even more helpful. Yeah.
So good. So Steve, so that's those 3 points are phenomenal. Now let's take it. So that's now you're executing. You've got the location. So how do you create like the menu? Like I'm sure the
Mm,
listeners like, how did you create that? Was that like a real like
yeah.
process? Do you have a team?
Yeah.
You who'd you go to really create? Because your brand is phenomenal. I love that. I love your coffee brand. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
How did you create? What are some things that went to creating that?
Yeah. So I would say it wasn't my genius. And I mean this in a really meaningful way. It wasn't so much that I had these amazing ideas. I think it was that I recognize where I'm shorthanded and I don't have strength, and I lean on others for those things. And that really helped me put all of this together. But I would say more important than that, there was a lot of God moments in starting this business. So, for example,
Mhm.
when I first looked at a location to put Copa Vida in, as our starting location, I had picked out this beautiful building, and it was an Art Deco building on Colorado that I really wanted, and I even offered to pay asking, and the landlord turned us down, and it was
Really?
like the best thing that could ever happen to me because the rent in that building would have killed me. It was beautiful, but I had these grandiose ideas, and unfortunately, I had enough of a budget that I could actually take a risk at it, and I think it was way too big for what we're looking for, and it was way too off the beaten path. The building itself was cool, so I had some people kind of going, "Are you sure?" But I kind of pushed past that, and then actually God closed that door for me, and so that really helped. But
Beautiful.
yeah, but
Interesting you say that 'cause a lot of people they get in these leases that just they don't realize because
yeah,
then they're so stressed out and trying to create
yeah,
profit just to pay for
yeah,
the lease is
yeah,
where it destroys them inside. So
yeah,
well, actually, God saved you
exactly.
from yourself.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
yes.
Yeah. So, the other, parts like the menu, I realized there were strengths that I have. So I look at my business in the 3 Ps, right? There's product, people, and process. And I think if you're starting off, you have to have some expertise in all 3 areas,
Yeah.
but you can't be the expert in all 3 areas. That's really hard to do, right?
Yep.
So I realized what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and I needed to find people to work with me that were good at those things. So I had very little to do in the beginning with actual menu development on beverage side and food side. On the beverage side, it was put together by Frank Law and Sam Hong, who are people, my first 2 hires. Frank, by the way, recently won U.S. Barista Champ this year, so I'm so proud of him.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
and he won with his own company called Be Bright Coffee. So I'm giving him a little plug, but it's just so happy to see him succeed so well. Sam, who went on to open a company called Softies Burgers, is also blowing up at the Smorgasburg, and all these articles are being written about his burgers too. So they both gone on to do some amazing projects of their own. But they were the experts that I brought in to help me do this. And I don't know if we have time for it, but I have a little story I can share with that.
Yes, please. Yeah, we got all time in the
Yeah,
world.
yeah. So before I got into coffee, recognizing that I needed to develop some expertise, I decided I love coffee and I drink coffee all the time and I make coffee at home, but there's no way I would consider myself a professional coffee expert, right? So I knew I had to go get some. So I actually decided to sign up for a program down in Costa Rica on a co-op, a farm that represents 825 families at that time called Copedota. And what I did there is I spent about 3 weeks to really get certified in coffee. So they walked me through everything from
Very
picking
cool.
the cherries off the bush to processing it to roasting it, and then eventually barista work as well.
Wow.
And yeah, so I literally moved there and stayed in this little tiny hotel, and where the towel, if you
You
use the towel
immerse
that
yourself.
morning, yeah,
That's how
yeah.
you do it.
I threw myself in it because I had the opportunity and the means to do so. But it was the last 2 days of my training was actually coffee shop work, so meaning barista work. And the woman who was teaching me how to be a barista was trying to teach me how to make a latte art. And so she just wanted me to do a simple heart. And I kept trying. And like, Kalani, I really tried. I really wanted to make this thing beautiful. And every time I would just fail. It would be a circle, it would be a butt, a pumpkin, anything but a heart. And so I would get so frustrated, and I would look at her, and her name was Melania, and I was like, "Hey, why is mine so ugly and yours so beautiful?" And she goes, "Oh, it's because I love coffee and you don't love coffee like I do."
Oh.
And I was like, "Excuse me? Like, what are you
Oh.
saying? Like, I just spent all this money and time to be here, and she's calling me out." And so at least that's how I heard it. So I got a little hurt, and I think she could tell that I was hurt. So she said, "No, no, you don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying, you don't love coffee." She's saying, my grandfather was a coffee farmer. My father is a coffee farmer. All my uncles are coffee farmers. My brothers will grow up to be coffee farmers. The only reason I'm not a coffee farmer is because I'm a woman, and this point, the best I can be in coffee right now is barista, and that's what I focus on. And she had placed second place in all of Costa Rica as their top barista.
Wow.
So she goes, when I say I love coffee, it's in my blood, it's in my genetics, it's in my DNA, it's, from generations of coffee. You love coffee differently. And it'll take you some time to get to the place where you
Wow.
love it like I do. And, finish the
What a
course.
defining moment.
Yeah.
Really.
So
Yeah.
I finished the course, and while I forgot probably about 60% of what I learned, um, but on the way home, that's all I could think about was her saying, "You don't love coffee enough." And I knew she was right. That's why it bothered me. When you hear truth,
Yes.
then it just gets under your skin. So that's where
Yeah.
I was like, oh, she spoke truth into my life. What do I do with this thing? Because I just spent all this time and energy, told all my friends I'm moving into this thing. And then I find out that I don't love the product enough to really be able to call myself an expert in this. And I'm about to invest money into starting in this.
Yeah,
But
what
I
they say,
sat
like the truth is like surgery. It hurts you, but it heals you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So I just sat there praying about it, and Lord, like, why did you put me in this place? So I got a little angry with him, right? Like, it's like, God, like, why did you show me this? I fall in love with this beautiful thing, this coffee idea, see how we could help support missionaries. And then you pull the rug out from under me by showing me this. And I was thinking about it. I was like, she's right. I don't love coffee. Does that mean I have to spend 13 years to learn this craft to become
Yeah.
like her?
Yes.
Or is there something I'm supposed to learn? And the more I thought about it, I realized she was right. It isn't the love of coffee that got me started. It's love of community. So to explain, I was in community urban ministry work when I first got out of college, doing race relations work. Worked for the LA County Human Relations Commission, and I was executive director for a dispute resolution center. And then, everything I've done, as there's a community kind of perspective to it. I'm a what they call a 1.5 generation Korean American, which means bicultural. I immigrated at such a young age that I can't really claim myself to be Korean, and I can't really claim myself to be American. I'm kind of stuck in the middle.
Mm.
Always thought that was a weakness, but God uses that, I think, in me to help create
Yes.
bridges, right? Yeah. But the funny thing was, when I first came to this country, I always knew when I walked into somewhere whether I was welcome or not. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you walk in somewhere and people look at you funny. No one has to say anything. There has to be,
You feel it. You feel it.
yeah, there doesn't need to be any signs. And so I thought that was an immigrant experience. And then later on, when I was working with the Human Relations Commission, I realized there's actually a whole bunch of people who feel this, whether because of age, gender, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, nationality, whatever. We all feel that, a sense of
Yeah.
not belonging when we walk into the wrong place, right? So one of the things I've always wanted to do is create space where community can develop. And my graduate degrees in urban planning, my first jobs out of college were about community development, and then here I am now in food and beverage. But that ethos, that thing that got built in me, didn't go away. And I thought, okay, that's what I bring to the table.
It's huge. Yeah, because
Yeah,
you had so much experience in community. And when
yeah,
I think of coffee, I love going there. Just meaning, I've met so many clients at coffee shops.
yeah,
I
yeah,
wrote both my books at a coffee shop. I
yeah,
mean, that you actually have the love of community, and that's what to me
yeah.
coffee shops are all about. Which is just
Absolutely.
yeah,
All of my first dates were at coffee shops, and I like to joke. So were all of my last dates.
yeah,
That's a safe place, right? I wrote my dissertation and senior thesis in a coffee shop. I hate working in libraries. I love coffee shops. There's noise,
yes,
but a sense of belonging with the group. That's what I love. So I was like, oh, that's what I bring to the table. So I really
huge.
felt like, okay, I know what I'm bringing to the table. It's the sense of the purpose of this business. It's
Yes.
this 12 years of experience in the food industry. I bring that to the table. You know what I got to do? I got to go find partners who are experts in food in terms of cooking and menu design and in coffee beverage design. Right. So that's how I ended up connecting with Frank and Sam, and there's another gentleman named Eric who started our first menu. Those are all people God brought into our lives, and we
Yeah.
ended up starting Copa Vida together. Yeah.
Steve, it's so interesting, and for the people who are listening to us right now, there's so many people that I come across. They don't know their PPC, their purpose, passion, calling, and it's so
Mm,
interesting because what you just said, your true purpose really is creating community. You're an entrepreneur, but your purpose was really using you're using coffee and your entrepreneurship, but creating community, which is your
sure.
purpose, which is
Yeah.
phenomenal. Wow, that's very
Thank
very.
you. Yeah. And so, out of those three P's, my main focus became process. It was people in the beginning, but I moved over to process. So I had somebody in charge of the customer experience and staff training, and then another person in charge of product, making sure our coffee tasted the way we really want to taste. Our food is also a huge part of our offering. And then I realized, hey, my job is to make sure the clock runs on time. The train runs on time, and the clock's set to the right time. So we just started to find different ways that we connect our strengths, and that's what helped really begin Copa Vida. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, God's hand was all over it. We opened up the location in 3 months, which is unheard of. I took a second
Wow.
generation, yeah, a wine bar, and we did a lot of sleepless nights in starting that location, but we opened in 3 months. We had a grand opening that was supposed to be 4 hours. It ran like 6 hours into midnight. The
How
stream of
fun.
people wouldn't stop. We had so much coffee given away that night. We went through 1 week's worth of coffee in one day.
One day with
Yeah,
six,
one
7
day.
hours.
Uh,
That's what a great way to get the word out, though. I mean,
Fire
totally.
department came, police department came, supply had spilled out, and like it was like a club opening or something. And it was a coffee shop, but it was amazing. It was amazing, and that was just due to God's blessing. Like we
Beautiful.
didn't know till 3 days before we opened that we were going to actually be allowed to open by health department. And so it was one of those, like, we got our health department sign off on Thursday. We opened on a grand opened on Friday, and our first day of operations was Saturday morning. But Saturday morning, I had to run over to a friend of ours who has a coffee shop to borrow coffee because
But
we
you ran out. That's
ran out of
crazy.
ice
What a
water.
good problem to have.
Yeah, yeah.
Steve, take us. So now you have a first location. So
Yeah,
take us now. You're building. You're building your team. You're finding you're refining your processes. Obviously, right?
yeah.
Because you don't get the 10 locations by accident. So take us to the time when you're like going to your next location. When did that idea actually pop? Hey, you know what? We could actually open up another location. Was that
Sure.
by strategy or was that by accident? What went into the process of opening up your second
Yeah.
location?
So it goes back to hiring Frank and Sam, but I was meant to go hire one general manager. I ended up hiring two at the same time because one of them said, "I'm coming too," and I didn't know what to do with that. Right? So,
Well,
uh, um,
those two people you got blessed right away.
oh yeah, and they're amazing. And there are other team members, Do Kim and Richard and Clancy. There's others who have come at the very beginning. There was a gentleman named Eric to really help launch the company, but
Yeah,
it and others along the way have joined and helped take it to where it is and help scale it. But I always wanted more than one because the idea was for us to create a business and a system that I can hand off to somebody else to work, take
you,
the missionary to take. But you can't really prove that with one location
that's right.
because, right, you do well in one location. It could be your process and product and all of that and your brand, or it could be just you hit the right spot, like it's a busy corner and it happens to be just the right location. So until you go into multiple locations, you can't really develop process. Also, with one location, you don't need a lot of process. My parents never put pen to paper to manage their small businesses because they were the two main,
Well,
yeah,
sure.
it's a mom and pop shop, and they talk to each other all the time. There was no need for creating email systems or Slack and communication this and why? Because they're talking to each other all the time. They're connected at the hip, right? So my thinking was in order for us to really justify building these systems and testing to see that it works, we have to have multiple locations. So I always wanted to grow, come in with scale. So we trained two general managers at the same time, knowing we were going to be opening up a second. And the best way to,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
different. Yeah,
So the best way to do that partially is to put the DNA of your very first location into multiple people. Then they become ambassadors to go into other locations. What I didn't strategize or plan for was where the second location would be. So my initial plan in LA area, there's a 210 freeway right along the Pasadena and
yes.
Glendale area, and I live in San Gabriel Valley, but at that time I was living in Pasadena, and my goal was actually to build Copa Vidas along the 210 freeway, so I can deliver the coffee and whatever inspections and checks I have to do. I can go just by going back and forth in the 210 freeway. So that was the idea. So, it's Burbank, Glendale,
Yeah,
Pasadena,
convenience.
Arcadia. Yeah, I thought that makes sense. People can,
Yeah,
duke it out for downtown LA and Arts District. I'm going to stay right here in this, 210 freeway, and this is going to be my corridor. But,
yeah.
God had different plans. And my second location ended up being in East Village in San Diego next to Petco Park. Yeah, that became my second location.
That's a great location. Oh
Yeah,
my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah,
Yeah, you know what? That's funny. We were just there. I remember passing that. How cool!
yeah.
That's a great location.
Thank
Wow.
you. Yeah.
Kind of
So
fired over your first location, but
yeah, so it was. I mean, it doesn't make any business sense. It was stupid. I mean, to be frank, like going, oh yeah, you just have barely started your first one, and you're having some success now. So the first thing you're going to do is take your team, your brain trust, split it in half, and send them all the way down to San Diego,
2 hours
and then
away.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, make yourself drive up and down. And the reason for that was because it was one of those God moments again. It wasn't a decision, a
You
broker
listen.
walked. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean the
you obey.
story's long, so I won't bore you with it. But there was very clearly God saying, "This is where I'm going to place you," and
Wow.
it was our job to say yes. And when we did, and so this is where the expansion part comes in. When we opened that location, it got such a huge splash, lots of PR because of the size of the development, the fact that it was next to Petco Park. It was in East Village as it was getting popular, so
Yeah.
we got a lot of articles written about us, and more importantly, a lot of developers and landlords from other real estate companies coming to visit us to see. In fact, one of the funny things about that location, it's actually a hangout for a lot of real estate brokers. They hold a lot of meetings at that coffee shop.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so what happened, that kind of spread the word out about Copa Vida being the place to be. So all of a sudden, all these landlords and developers started recruiting us. So even though my plan was a 210
Oh, we're
freeway,
talking about like
yeah,
strategic location and
yeah,
listening
not,
to God's like
yeah,
direction
yeah,
to expand you.
yeah.
Whoa. Go deeper
So
with that. That's so
yeah,
cool.
so number two, three, four, and five were all San Diego.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that wasn't even on your radar at all, was it?
no, no. I wasn't planning on going down to San Diego till, maybe my 10th year or something. I was going to try to establish along the foothills, along that 210 freeway when we have about five. I
Yeah.
felt at that point, then it justifies us coming out of region because with five, you can start running with a regional direct manager rather than or a district manager, we call, rather than a single general manager in each location. So the idea was to expand up there, develop a team, and take some of the people that are growing out of there into LA, Torrance area, Orange County, then San Diego. So I was going to do a sort of not a true linear, but a line straight down south. So eventually, yes to San Diego, but it wasn't planned. The second location was not. Yeah, that's not what I intended.
Well, for the people who are listening here, his first
Yeah.
location was in Pasadena, correct? And
Yes.
then from Pasadena to San Diego, on a good day, it's about a 2 hour drive. On a bad day, it's about a 2 month drive.
Yeah. No, you hit it. You hit it. There have been days where I just gave up. Like halfway down,
Really?
I would just go. Yeah, there was a jackknife truck on the
Oh,
five
I'm
freeway,
telling
and there's only one
you, one
freeway
day.
going. So you just go, I'm done.
The crazy and the most beautiful thing about that location, Petco Park, to me, I've been to a lot of
Yeah,
baseball fields. That's one of the best.
yeah,
It's right in the middle of San Diego. It's a
yeah,
beautiful stadium. Oh
yeah,
my gosh, they did such a great job. And the San Diego Padres, they're one of the top teams in baseball. That is such a great location.
yeah,
It's a vacation spot for a lot of people. So
yeah.
you think about it, Copa Vida could expand really nationwide. So Steve, let's go back to people always wonder how franchises grow. So is it like the magic number is 5 locations when you actually hire a regional? That way you hand off more responsibility so you can actually scale even more. So take us through that process.
Yeah, so I think it all depends on the type of business you have. So there's no like magic number, but I think building a pyramid to run your organization is
Yes.
inevitable as you grow. And there are ways where you can kind of trickle down or trickle up. So just build up, if you will. So a lot of pyramids are built from base up to the top
Yeah.
pinnacle, not build the top and then you try to build a base underneath it, right? So, uh,
Beautiful.
yeah, so some people, what I mean by that is you don't want to start with too much overhead all at once because then you make your company top heavy. I made that mistake. And so I'm not saying this is one of those experiences I got because of the mistakes I made, not
Yes.
because, I planned it that way, but between 5 and 10 is really tough and I'm experiencing it. So I'm not saying I have answers, but between 5 and 10, it's tough because you're too small to actually afford a full management team, upper management team
Yes.
that has very little to do hands and feet work. They just literally manage systems, but you're too big to not have it at all.
Yes.
So if you have 5 locations, you're not talking about maybe 50 employees, if, give or take, right? But right around that time, you start needing an HR team. You start needing an accounting team, not a single bookkeeper, but you start needing services that are beyond just an individual because the amount of things you have to take care of. People forget it isn't. The old adage is if you love baking, become a baker and don't own a bakery. Don't start, open a bakery. It's the same thing. Like if you like coffee, be a barista or get a job in the coffee industry. Don't start a coffee shop because the bulk of your work is going to be behind the scenes, not dealing with your customers, right? And so there's a lot of people who offload the back work to others, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But at a
Yeah.
certain size, that doesn't work anymore, right?
So
So
yeah.
yeah. So now you need an HR person, you need a marketing person, you need an accounting team person, eventually you're going to need a quality person because who's going to make sure that all the locations are going to taste the same? Well,
Yes.
in a 2, 3 locations, it's the owner operator who does all of this, right?
Hmm.
That's why you don't see them at the bar anymore. It's not that they don't want to work the bar.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the most fun job, is to
Yes.
interact
Right.
with customers and,
Customers.
yeah, and make coffee and talk to them about the day. I mean, how great is your day when you can do that
That's
with
what
people,
you
right?
can. Yeah.
But at 2 or 3, you start having to pull away from that because all your time is spent figuring out AP, AR, vendors, landlords, dealing with compliance issues. And after there's these markers, 50 employees and 100 employees, the regulations change, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
recently, California passed a law about minimum wage for fast food workers, but it only applies to companies of a certain size, right? So
Mhm.
as you grow, those are the scale problems you start hitting, right?
Got it. Got it.
Yeah. And then if you especially span too far apart, the culture change.
So
I
true.
Yeah, so the kind of people that come to your shop and the kind of people that work for you in San Diego have a different general, and this is on average, obviously, we're all individuals, but on average, they have a different tendency, likes and dislikes, than our LA locations. The culture is rhythms are slightly different. So how do you take your company culture and apply it, especially when it matters so much to your business because that's what your customers experience, right?
Right. That's right. That's right.
So you're in this unenviable situation in that 5 to 10 unit where you have to build certain things, but you have to build it in such a way that it doesn't topple you over.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you add just too many people up top, it topples the whole thing. Because each person you hire to be like a director level person, they don't come by themselves. There's no such thing as a director of one, like, or a department of one. Then
Sure.
what's the point in having a title? You're just the HR person, right? But
Right.
once you're a director, you need someone who reports to you. You need to have support. You need to have, right. So yeah, it's really tough because in building these departments, these are not like your labor dollars. They're all overhead dollars,
Mm.
right? And so that means your business has to be doing well enough to support all of that. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's this really interesting
Yeah.
balance that you have to,
So Steve, take us through. One of the things I want to have the listener really listen to. What's one of the toughest times you had to push through? Because there's tough times running a
oh,
business.
yeah.
What's one of the toughest times that you, as a leader, also as a husband, as a father, because it's all encompassing running a business. What's one thing or a situation in your business where you had to really keep your faith and just push through to
Yeah.
to stay sane?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this probably is shared by a lot of entrepreneurs during this time. But I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the pandemic. It had a real impact. I mean, not just mentally and in
Yeah.
some ways physically because you get sick, but I was in Honduras. One of the perks of the job is to go to Origin and select coffee. So
So good.
in February 2020, I was in Honduras, the end of February, looking for coffee for Copa Vida. Got on a plane to come back home. And while we were there, we were starting to hear about COVID outbreaks all over the world.
Hmm.
Got on a plane. I was on the last. I came home the last day before they shut down the airport. So if I hadn't been on that plane, if I missed that plane, I would have been
You're
stuck in
stuck.
Honduras for a month. Yeah. So I still think about that, going, "Oh my gosh!" But I just got back, and then they shut down everything in March. And at that time, we had 12 locations. So we were actually bigger. And I ended up closing 3 locations during the pandemic. But I had, oh my gosh, yeah. In March, I had to call 53 people to tell them they were laid off.
That's tough. That's
Yeah,
tough.
and I think I just lost all steam. And you're saying the same thing, to each person. You mean it, obviously, but I wanted to personally call them and to assure them that we're going to keep pushing and to, hold on. And here's what we can do to help. And so we offered everybody a couple of weeks of pay out of our own pockets because we felt like we knew what. I mean, I love our team, and they work on hourly basis, which means it's not like someone who's on a salary and are going to get a check regardless. They only get paid when they work, right? So you cut that out, and it's a sudden stop. It's a harsh reality. So we wanted to give
Yeah.
a little bit of a soft landing, and that was all we could afford. But we extended that, and I think it was about my 20th call where I just like felt all my,
Yeah.
like that whole we're gonna do it, that kind of willpower just disappeared. Like I just, yeah. So
Interesting.
I finished my 53rd call, and that was the last one on my call sheet. Uh, and I just put my bag together, and I started walking out my office door. And I have a great relationship with my father now, but it wasn't always the case. Immigrant family story, and he had always held me to high standards and was really pushing me all the time, and that led to some strains. We understand each other so much better. Yeah, now that he's a grandfather, he's this really soft man, and I don't know what happened to him. I feel like I got shortchanged. My daughters are getting this amazing, loving grandfather. And I was like, where were you?
Right?
Because, he loved me a different way. And the reason I bring that up is he was my first phone call coming up, pulling out of the driveway. And the reason I called him first rather than a friend or, a mentor or, even my wife was because I actually called him because I don't know anybody else who went through more stuff and came out the other end. He went through a war in South Korea. He lost his mother, my grandmother. He lost his brother during the war. He made it, established himself, and then replanted into America to give my sister and I a better life. He turnover after turnover, he's gone through several different things, and he still comes at the other end and keeps pushing. So I thought if anybody's going to know what to tell me at this point, he is. So I called him, and I remember saying to him, um, Dad, it's like I built all these sandcastles, beautiful sandcastles, and then all of a sudden a wave came and knocked it all down and
Wow.
wiped it out in one fell swoop. That's what it feels like. And
Mm.
my dad, true to himself, says to me, and I'll never forget it. He goes, "Hey, idiot, look around. You're on the beach. There's plenty of sand. Build more castles." And then he hung up.
I love it. Wow.
He wouldn't.
It was such
Yeah,
wisdom to actually go to him.
yeah,
That's such wise words because it kind of like
yeah,
it shook you up and realized, you know what? He made you look at things that you were grateful for and
yeah,
that were so good in your life. That's so
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Wow.
I mean, what he was saying too, also, in that moment, like he didn't give me time to wallow,
Yeah.
which I could see myself like falling deeper into that
Yes.
and just like sitting in it, going, woe is me. And I'm very capable of that, right? So for him to like just do that kind of shook me. But the other thing is his analogy was so perfect. I thought I had the beautiful, analogy of sandcastle, wave came. I thought I was being the poetic one. And it was, hey, idiot, you're surrounded by sand, build more castles.
You're still on the beach. I mean, come on. Wow.
And yeah, so, but that was the hardest day because it wasn't just that we had to lay off because everybody was laying people off and everybody was closing. It was this idea that God gave me a vision or what I thought was an image of what I thought he was doing with my work.
Yeah.
And I realized at that point, like I did take on Copa Vida as my work too much in some ways.
Mm.
Like I birthed it. It was my child. It was my third child. And, like I was almost in a way making it an idol. And rather than focusing on the giver, I was focusing on the gift, right? We've heard that phrase. But
Yes.
because I was doing that and I made this so precious, when it disappeared, I lost all hope. Like
Mm.
it just crashed. And I think it was a moment that God was using to say, what's more important, me or the plan?
Yeah.
And because my plan was to get to a certain side. Yeah, yeah. And so I think it was so helpful, but it was a moment of like thinking that I misheard God all these years. This was all a mistake. Because why? There's failure here. It's closed,
Mm.
and I knew that I wasn't going to be able to reopen all 13, 12 at that time. Yeah, I knew that wasn't going to happen. So I knew I was going to have to reduce. I was just afraid of how many we were going to lose in the process, right? So there's a sense of doom, right? And to me, when you close that number, it isn't just those locations that get closed and those people that don't get returned to a job, but now the overhead I was talking to you about can't be held up. Less number of locations means less ability to pay for. So that means I have to cut up here too. So the sense of like loss was overwhelming. Um, that would be the toughest time. Yeah, but it was also very eye opening. Yeah.
So that do you think that really that probably made you a better leader too? I mean, to push through that. And so on that note, Steve, I mean, obviously you're here now. You pushed through that tough time, right? And I remember one of the last conversations, you actually hired a couple of those people back, which is really
Yeah.
cool when you were
Yeah.
able to. So take us now. We see where Copa Vida was. You birthed it. Now you're scaling it. Then you got over COVID. And so take us now. What does the future look like for Steve and Copa Vida? What does that look like over the next 36 months? What do you see
Yeah.
growing to?
That's great. Um, I'm laughing, sorry, because I used to do a lot of planning. I'm very kind of like business school kind of focused,
Yeah.
look the long view, 10 years out, describe that back into, distill that down
Yes.
to a 5-year plan, that into a 1-year plan, into 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, 1 week, today. Like,
Yes.
plan it out. If anything, the pandemic taught me was that throw all of that out.
That's so good.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, I forgot where it's in the Bible,
It
but
seems like you're like right now, like from that statement, it's like you're more present,
yeah,
right? And that's the
yeah,
key is being more present, enjoying the process. Because
yeah,
sometimes, so many entrepreneurs, we live so much into the future, it stretches us. We stress out so much trying to make it happen.
yeah,
We don't enjoy the process. So
yeah.
that's phenomenal, Steve. I love it.
Not only that is that we feel a sense of failure when we don't hit some of these things, and we
Yeah.
don't see that the truth is that everything is both a failure and a success, right? There's all of that involved in every little thing that happens, right? There's things that are good, things that are bad. We learn from it, we make them, thing. A lot of my mentors also started really like pushing me into thinking, hey, take the next step that God shows you. Stop
Yeah.
worrying about what, you know, the
Yeah.
promised land looks like. You got to get out of the desert first. Like it's just, yeah, put the one step in front of you. Don't, worry about this, that, and the other thing, because you don't know what God has in mind. You can't read God's mind, nor should you be trying. That's not the effort. It's not to guess where God's going to lead you and try to get there before Him or try to set yourself up. Part of my problem is that I have an ego that says, I want to help God along the process. Let me let me do my part,
Like
right?
he
Like,
needs your help, right?
yeah. So, and truly, I think in being in that process right now, this time in my life, at least anyway, or in the life of Copa Vida and my life, because I still have a hard time separating the two. I'm in a place where I'm just trying to hear Him and understand the next two steps I'm supposed to take. And so I gave up 36 months ahead. I gave that up a little while ago because I realized now, having said that, if you're leading people, you have to have something to share with them,
Yes.
right? So you can't go, hey, we'll get there when we get there, or
Yeah.
it'll be what it will be, right? Like, no, there are
Yes.
people who are depending upon you to show
For the
them,
vision.
yeah, for a vision. And so the thing that I'm starting to learn how to do is rather than telling them a destination or a size or a quantifiable number,
Yeah.
I'm actually trying to shift our thinking and our processing and our talking back into the value statements and mission, purpose to say
Beautiful.
our model for success is when our customers feel a sense of community, not when we hit 11 locations. Our model for success is, hey, we got to get to profitability today. And I'm going to bring it down to something more real, right? Like, we got to get to profitability today. I don't need to worry about how we're going to afford 25 locations or raising $10 million or selling for 50 an exit plan. That's not my problem. That's not your problem. Right now, today's problem is let's get to profitability in every location. Let's hit these numbers in every location. But that's today, not 3 years from now, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So it's
Makes
pulling
sense.
that down. Yeah.
Makes sense. So, Steve, I want to end it with this. So, to the person that's listening to this, they made it this far. Phenomenal interview, by the way. Phenomenal.
Thank you.
I love it. The people are going to love this. Talk to the person that's listening to this who is going to start a business, right? There's two people I want you to talk to. To the person that hasn't started his business yet, and the person that's in the thick of it. So what's some encouraging word you can give to the person that has an idea, but hasn't started his business yet?
Yeah.
What would you tell that person?
Yeah, to that person, I think I would say, hey, instead of looking for a perfect business plan or a perfect opportunity, waiting for the right thing, so that all the ducks are in a row, I think the better question and focus is how committed are you to the idea of doing what you're doing? How willing to sacrifice are you? Because the measure of success isn't actually how good your plan or product is. The measure of success to me, or the key thing and sort of common theme of anybody who I think succeeded in business is this grit. That's the common theme that I see. And everybody who I admire having had companies and businesses, most of them will tell you, if they're honest and in a vulnerable place, most of them will tell you they got where they got because they were lucky, because they were great or smart, or they just
That is a common that you're right. That's a common theme for the people I'm interviewing. It's so true.
and that
Common theme. The hard work, you get luckier. It's so so true.
and whether you look at it as luck or as blessing, that comes to the people who are willing to gut it through some of the tough parts. So if you don't have an ability to deal with failure, if you don't have sort of a commitment to, I'm going to look stupid for a while till the right time comes and God's timing comes and the time of harvest comes. You don't start with harvest. You start with sowing and tilling the, like, it takes a while. And farmers understand this, right? And even then they have to be dependent upon weather. So it's not like they control everything either, but they understand it. So like, unless you have that, don't start. So instead of saying, what's the easiest way for me to make this, or it's when you build something easy, it falls apart easy too.
Yeah.
I think the key thing to build for a long time is to say, hey, how much am I willing to like risk? And only when you have that answer, then should you jump in. And this is not to dissuade people from jumping in, but when they're looking for an easy way in, like I don't, have a lot of money. I'm sure somebody will give it to me because I have great ideas. I don't really want to work, 80 hours a week. I want balance in my life. Don't start your own business then, please, because you're going to waste. It ain't going to happen, right? Like anybody I know who started, they have sleepless weeks, months. They've gone through it, and then they come out. And I think even the founder of Chick-fil-A at one point was quoted saying, "Yes, we're a 13-year-old overnight sensation," right? Because most people don't know that it took them years and years to get to a point where they became, ready to, expand nationally. Yeah, they see the success, but they don't know that they started with this thing, and this is like their 20th menu that they tried, and and they happened to be at the right place at the right time, and the expansion happened. But yeah, so I think that's what I would say to anybody who's starting. And if you're in the thick of it,
Yes.
yeah, if you're in the thick of it, I think the thing that I can share with you is, I think it's really important to me. Find people to walk with. Don't suffer by yourself. Yeah, fellowship is really important. Mentorship is even more important, I think, in many ways. Yeah, find smarter
I
people.
heart
Yeah,
for men, and men need men.
yeah,
You just said there's so much wisdom in that because men we suffer anxiety. We tend to seclude ourselves. But I think like the encouragement you just gave. Yeah, if you're going through it, seek wise counsel.
yeah,
Right? Have someone else help you carry your cross. That's so
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah.
Right. So any parting words for the listener, Steve?
I'm assuming a lot of people who are listening are people who are interested in starting small businesses or starting their own ventures. And I'd encourage you to, if God planted that in your heart, to chase it. And I'm seeing more and more how God is using entrepreneurship and small businesses for sharing the kingdom. In a lot of places, developing countries, the doors are tightly shut to anybody who wants to come in to share the gospel. But if you want to come in and invest, you want to start a business, it actually opens wide doors. Now, even Middle East and Saudi Arabia are opening their doors to foreign-owned businesses to come in, and I really believe part of the reason China has been opened up as much as it has in the past decade, and churches are starting to develop, and Christianity is spreading in China, is because a lot of businesses have allowed the doorway to open. So China's always been closed politically, but economically they want everybody, right? So it allows doors to open, and I think it creates pathways that we didn't think about. So even with just that, encourage you to think big, think big, not in terms of like, oh, I want 25 locations or 20 locations, but think big in terms of the impact your business might be able to have on those around you, because you have the constituency of your customers, you have the constituency of your employees and your team members, but you also have God as your constituent in running your company and your business. So encourage them, and I just want them to know that they're doing things that can be leading to kingdom work rather than just, hey, I'm turning a profit here. Yeah.
So good. Thanks, Steve. Steve, thank you so much. For the listener, thank you for staying with us. And it's a phenomenal interview. I love the impact you're going to make, Steve. So I really want to thank you, your spouse, your kids for taking the time with ROL, Returns on Life, to share the listener how to get their purpose fulfilled and their assignment. And so, yes, that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Been reading it. It's great.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kalani.
Thank you for listening to this interview with Steve Chang. I love the fact that how he was able to take his idea that God gave him and actually execute it, and then start scaling his business right away. And he was listening and had faith the whole time, even though he had some rough times. He actually just executed, started scaling, started the processing of the processes of scaling his company. And then when he actually hit COVID, which was a really hard time, and he talks about, he had to let go of his 53 employees, which was the hardest time in his life to get over. And that really hurt him spiritually and emotionally. And I'm sure it did. I just loved how he was able to get through that. And so if you love this interview, please listen to the other interviews that I've been doing with other entrepreneurs. And if you have a business that you have been called to do, please execute it right away. Kalani Bale, have a great day.